Hello, everyone. Welcome to the TradeStation Masterclass. My name is Jesus Nava, Director of Client Training and Education for TradeStation, and we're here to teach about the TradeStation technology just to make it easier for you to use all the different applications that are there. Today is all about technical analysis and the studies that come with TradeStation, and we're going to highlight understanding VWAP. VWAP is an acronym for those that don't know, and it stands for Volume Weighted Average Price. And so we're going to talk about the different studies that are inside of the TradeStation platform that allow you to track VWAP and some of the technicalities that you have to be aware of when dealing with VWAP. Before we get started, the usual disclosures for this presentation: keep in mind that every symbol and idea that I talk about is for educational purposes only. These are not recommendations of TradeStation. Also, active trading is not suitable for everyone, and past historical performance is no guarantee of future results. If anybody needs additional information on these disclosures, you can go to the link right there on this PowerPoint slide, www.tradestation.com/important-information. This PowerPoint that I have here, I'm going to share with the class right here in the chat. So the link will give you access to the PDF version of this PowerPoint. Let's go next on this PowerPoint to talk about how VWAP is calculated and what it is. We already identified the acronym. VWAP stands for Volume Weighted Average Price. So rather than just being a simple average where you take all the numbers, add them together, and then divide them by the number of items in the list, it's weighted with volume. So the volume weighted average price may be used as a benchmark to identify potential market entries and exits. And it's interesting that we think about this because it does provide your prices with a little bit more weight in regards to volume, of course. If some prices are being traded more than others, those prices that are being traded more should have more weight when you're calculating that average, because they seem to be important levels that you should be paying attention to, or important levels where certain activity is happening, and they may, cause that same reaction when the prices approach those levels one more time. They can indicate if the market is bullish or bearish and signal potential entry and exit opportunities. So let's take a look at the math behind the VWAP so that we can understand how is it different than a straightforward moving average. It's calculated for each day. So we know that every day we get a new number. It kind of resets at the beginning of the session, beginning from the time the market opens to the time they close. And we mean the market open even in the pre-market. That's when the VWAP starts calculating. So the VWAP that we supply as a quote inside of the TradeStation platform starts at the very first trade of the day. Not necessarily the market open, but the very first trade in the pre-market session. So VWAP, or the formula itself, it's going to be volume times the price that volume happened at, and then divided by the cumulative volume. I think I am missing something here, because it's not just price times volume, it is the summation of all the prices times the volume that you have to keep in mind in order then to divide by the cumulative volume. So it's not just one price and one volume, it's all the prices that the symbol is trading at times the volume at each one of those prices, the summation of all that, and then we divide that total by the cumulative volume. We're going to take a look at an example on how VWAP is calculated. For those that are not familiar, I think it'll become more clear, and you will have a better understanding of why the VWAP may be providing you more information than just a simple moving average. So let's take a look at how it's calculated. So this is just some additional information before I go into the example. The VWAP is calculated by summing. So we talked about the summation, the dollar value of each trade. So price times trade size, and then dividing that sum total by the total volume up to that point in the trading session. In historical VWAP, which we'll get to in a little moment, is a little different. But let's first of all understand how real-time VWAP is calculated. So I'm going to bring up an Excel spreadsheet because I want to have trade price and trade volume. Let's go ahead and make this a little bit larger. I just want to make sure that we understand what each one of these are, okay? So let's say, for example, that we have some trade prices here, 10, 12, and 14. And at each one of these, of course, prices, there's going to be a trade size. Let's say that at $10, 10,000 shares were traded. I'm going to put in a 10,000 here. When the price went to $12, we had 20,000 shares traded. And when the price went to $14, we had a total of 30,000 shares traded. So trade volume, let's go ahead and trade it. Let's do a little bit more specific, traded shares. Okay, so trade price plus traded shares. If we are looking at a simple average, what's a simple average? It's taking, all the prices that have been traded and averaging them together. So this is going to be equal the average, I think that's the way you do it, of A2 through A4. Okay, so we take those three numbers, create an average, and it gives us a 12. And that's very, I used rounded numbers like this, so it would be easy for us to do the math. But if you add 10 plus 12, it gives you 22, plus 14 is 36, and 36 divided by 3 gives you 12. That's a simple average. Now, to calculate the VWAP, let's do VWAP right here. First of all, we need to have some totals. Let me add a row here so that we can say totals. Okay, let me do a line here as well so that we can divide that. I'm going to do that line right there. Let's do a thicker line. Okay, so I'm going to take those numbers and total them together. In fact, let me go ahead and add, because this total should be back here, and then I'll delete this. Okay, so the total is this. We need all the traded prices. Of course, that's 36, but we need the total number of shares. Before we do that, I'm going to add another column here that says price times shares, because we need that calculation as well. In the calculations, it's important that we calculate the price times the shares. So let's go ahead and do that. And the calculation would be, I'm going to take B10, which is not B10, sorry, B2, which is, the trade price of 10 times the traded shares, which is C2. And that'll give me the value. So if you trade 10,000 shares at a price of $10, that's a traded value of $100,000. If we do the same thing for the other two, I'm just going to drag the formula down. We can see that if we trade 20,000 shares at $12, that's $240,000 of value. Okay, so my totals are right here. This is the trade value. So I want to add what the total traded value of these three prices are. So right here, I'm just going to do the sum. $760,000. So we have to take that number, and we also have to take this number, the total volume. So let's do sum that. All right, so we total up all the shares that were traded. We sum up the traded value, dollar value for each one of these formulas, and then we divide one into the other. So the VWAP in this case would be D5, which is the one highlighted in blue, divided by C5, which is total number of shares traded. And here we go. The VWAP is 12.66. So take a look at the two numbers here. Simple average is 12, and the VWAP is 12.66. Why is that? Because of the trade size. You can see how the shares that were traded were more towards the higher prices. You know, at $12, 20,000 shares, at $14, 30,000 shares. Because of that weight, of course, it favors a higher price. And you can see that as we change some of the numbers here. Let's say that 14, instead of having 30,000 shares traded, it had 50,000 shares. I'm going to change this 50,000 to 50,000, and you can see that the VWAP increases to 13. So the more traded shares happen on the higher prices, the higher the VWAP is going to be, or the average VWAP, because it's favoring the higher prices. If all of a sudden, you know, we increase this, let's say, for example, that we go the other way. Let's say that instead of 10,000 shares at 10, we have 1 million. 1 million shares were traded at $10. Maybe a big institutional trade or something. If I hit enter, take a look at the VWAP. The VWAP now is 10.22. Now it favors more the lower prices because of the size of that trade. A volume weighted average price. The simple average doesn't change. It's always 12. But as a trader, of course, volume is a big factor in making these levels significant. You know, if we have 1 million shares traded at $10 and only 50,000 shares traded at 14, you're going to see that traders recognize that 10 is probably a more significant level. And that's why the VWAP here has that additional calculation that puts weight in terms of volume. Very interesting calculation. So hopefully this is clear and I did not lose people, but putting things in a spreadsheet does allow you to see the details about the calculation and how the calculation varies based on, you know, volume, which is a big factor of this calculation. Let's go over here to my PowerPoint and take a look at historical VWAP, which is a different calculation because it's calculated by summing the dollar value of each bar. So average bar price times the bar volume, and then dividing that sum total by the total volume up to that point in the chart. So the calculations are very similar, but because they're using, you know, price and volume. But think about this for a moment. When you look at a historical chart inside of TradeStation, indicators don't have all the tick data. You know, when they look at a candlestick, for example, all they see is the opening price, the high, the low, and the closing price. Those are all the prices that they see. Of course, it assumes that all the prices in the candle were traded, but there's no record of every single tick with the shares that were traded at every single tick, or let's say at every single price. That's information that it's available in real time, but on a historical bar, no. So what happens is that when you have a historical VWAP, it's got to do an assumption of where the prices went and which prices were traded the most. And what it'll do on a historical VWAP, it'll create an average price for the bar. So first of all, it'll average open, high, low, and close to get an average price. And then it'll multiply that by the volume of the candle itself and keep that as that bar's dollar value or dollar traded or traded dollar value is what I'm trying to say. And then it's going to sum all the different candles together. So the calculation does change a little, and that's why you're going to see some discrepancies when we compare real-time VWAP with historical VWAP, but it's going to be very clear once we are finished with this class, where do you see the real-time? Where do you see the historical? And the VWAP, of course, is reset each trading day. Remember, we said that at the very beginning. It's supposed to be a calculation to start at the beginning of the session. Let's go over here to TradeStation and take a look at some of the places where you can see VWAP. First place is Matrix. let me pull up something that is not as high priced as Microsoft. I'm going to go here to AT&T. It's trading at $20.76. In the matrix, the price that has a small v to the left of it is the VWAP. Right here, it falls right on the, sometimes it falls right on the gray highlight, and you see how the V is pushed over here to the left. That happens if the VWAP is also the current trading price. But you can see that when it's not, the V is right next to the price. That V, that small v, it's the VWAP. We just don't spell, or include all the letters in here. But for anybody that's asking, when you look at the matrix, you should, be able to scroll up and down and be able to identify the V, which is a calculated value in real time of the volume weighted average price. Very interesting, and it's in every matrix, regardless of the asset class you trade. So if I go here to ESZ, is it ESU 22? So this is the September contract for the S&P E-mini. You can see that on the first view, I don't see the V. So I have to scroll either up or down. I'm going to go down because if I go up, these prices have not been traded. You can see in the color. In fact, the high of today is 39.18, and the S&P seems to be trading close to the high of today. But if I scroll down, I see the V right here at 38.8425. And remember, this is the calculation that takes into account the price times the number of shares traded. Here, you can see the contracts traded. So if you sit down and you multiply each one of these contracts or amounts of contracts with the price and plug those numbers into the formula that we just did in Excel, you'll get this VWAP right here. It starts calculated on the very first tick. A couple of things you can do to this VWAP. If you right click and you go to data, you have an option to reset it. If you reset the VWAP, of course, you're changing the calculation. If you say now, which is the very first option on this menu, it'll reset it and it'll put it right here at the current trading price. And as the prices are trading from this moment on, you'll get a real-time calculation of VWAP, but as of now. Sometimes if you're putting on a trade right now, it may be beneficial to see how the market activity resembles your entry price. And if the VWAP continues to be around your entry price, you could say that it's a strong level. Now, if it moves away from your price very quickly, then that level may have not been as strong, or it may just come back to it. So there's a lot of interpretations when it comes to how the price moves in relationship to a price, but you do have the ability here to right click, go to data, and go to reset VWAP, and you can do it as of now. As of session start is the default. So if I do as of session start, it'll go back to the way it was, or I can do as of, and I have a date and a time. So let's say, for example, that the session for the S&P started yesterday, Monday, at about 5 p.m. Central Time. I think it's the time that it started. So if I wanted to start the session as of yesterday, but not at 5 p.m., let's say that I want to start it at, I don't know, 1800 p.m. Well, 1800 p.m. is 6 p.m. Let's say, for example, we want to do a little bit later. If you want to do 10 p.m., let's say, for example, 10 p.m. Okay, the VWAP is calculated as of that date and time. Now, the date field only works for symbols that have an overnight session. And that's why it does give you the ability to set the date or the starting calculation as of yesterday. Of course, it wouldn't work for a stock because a stock doesn't trade from the prior day. The session opens early in the morning. Usually, there are some stocks that start trading as early at 6 a.m., but there's no concept of, oh, this session started, the day before, as in futures. So futures is the only type of asset class where you would be able to select a date that is not today, like a yesterday's date, because the section actually started the day before. So again, it doesn't work for stocks. So that's the way that you manage VWAP right here inside of the matrix. You can also display the VWAP right up here. Now, sometimes, yes, it is challenging for you to have to scroll up and down and try to identify where the VWAP is. It's a lot easier just to look at the top and see it up there. In fact, I believe it's already up there. No, it's not, but you can add it. So let me right click right up here. Nothing happens. Let me go to settings. There you go. I'm going to go to settings, click on columns. By the way, data is up here as well. So you don't necessarily have to right click in order to go to reset VWAP. You can also access that menu right up here under data. I'm going to go to settings this time though, and I'm going to go to columns. And I'm going to go into the columns of the quote bar. The quote bar is what you see at the very top of the matrix. And in the quote bar, I can add VWAP right here. Let me add it. Okay, and I'm gonna move it down. I can put it right here next to, net change. I'll leave it there and click OK. So now I have this, I have a display of VWAP right here at the top of my matrix. So I don't have to scroll up and down. I know that the VWAP is 3884.74. And whatever you do to the reset does not change that. So if I go to reset VWAP and I say as of now, it'll change right here. You can see the VWAP is 3916, but it doesn't change this one up here. The one up here is the official one. That's the one that is calculated and it comes straight from the server. The one that is shown right here is the one that you have a little bit of control over, and you can choose where you want that VWAP to be reset. Okay, just keep that in mind, because sometimes if you reset it to now, you're going to see that this VWAP does not match the top VWAP. This VWAP is as of the beginning of the session. So it includes all the trading activity on that current session. So Marcel, the reason why somebody would want to reset the VWAP is just to be used as a benchmark from a starting point. You know, a lot of times you want to know how does trading perform, or how is trading volume allocated into different prices from a starting point. And that starting point could be a trade. I mean, you open up a position, you are in the market. So from that point on, you may be interested in calculating VWAP just to identify what the majority of the volume is telling you where the price is going. Is it going above what your entry price is, or is it going below what your entry price? Remember that the volume weighted average price is volume weighted. That's what the name says. So it's interesting to know, you know, where the majority of the activity is happening from a starting point. It could also be that you want to exclude the pre-market or post-market activity. In this case, it would be the pre-market, because you have a starting point and you say, well, I don't want to have, you know, any of the pre-market activity included in the VWAP calculation. You can say, I want to start my VWAP as of 9:30 a.m., which is the opening of the, you know, regular session. That's another reason why you may want to reset the VWAP. All right. Okay, so let's take a look at other places where we can see VWAP. Radar screen is another place. Let me go and resize this, open up my applications and go into radar screen. Okay, I'm going to put my radar screen over here on the right. I'm going to link it to my matrix. I'm going to add the Dow Jones Industrial. And from here, I'm just going to go to studies and add studies. I'm going to scroll down to the V's, looking for VWAP. We have access to the VWAP, and we have access to the VWAP estimated, and we also have access to the VWAP bands. I think VAR, not sure what VAR means, variable bands maybe, I'm not really sure. Would have to look at the notes inside of the code, but we'll take a look at these. VWAP right here, just straight VWAP, should match the VWAP number that we were able to add right here to my matrix. Let me go ahead and add it, and I'll move it down next to percent change. It's going to be right here. All right, so that's VWAP right here. Let's take a look at Apple. Apple's VWAP is 148.82. You can see that it's 148.82 over here in the matrix. And you can see that it's different right here in 149.79. Let's see, let's reset. If we go to data, reset VWAP as of session start. If I do it as of session start, you can see that it's 148.79. You can see how they're slightly different because this is calculated separately from the calculation that happens on the server. Now, specifically what accounts for the minor change, that's a difficult question to answer. I'm not really sure. You know, if I right click here and I go to data and I go to reset VWAP as of session start, this is what I get, 148.79. The one that's on the server is 148.82, and it matches the VWAP right here on the radar screen, 148.82. Most of the times the difference is just going to be pennies, but I think one may include some trades that the other one doesn't. You know, it says as a session start, but you know, the session start, of course, is tricky because it all depends on the symbol you're trading. Some symbols start trading earlier than others. Some symbols have a pre-market, some symbols don't. Some brokers may say, okay, so yes, there's trading activity at 6, but we're not going to allow you to place a trade until 8, which is the case of TradeStation. You know, there are some symbols that start trading as early as 6 a.m., but TradeStation, you cannot place a trade before 8 a.m. in the pre-market. So there may be variations in, you know, a few trades here and there that are not accounted for from one calculation to the next, and that could be, you know, the difference in one to the other. All right. Where do you see VWAP estimated? Is it in radar screen or is it in chart Prasad? Because everybody should have it in radar screen. So if you go to studies, add studies, VWAP should be one of the studies in there. All right. Make sure you look closely, but VWAP should be in your radar screen studies. Another application where VWAP is visible, of course, is charting. Let me go here to chart analysis. Now, we did talk about historical calculations of VWAP and how they're a little bit different than the real-time calculation. If you want to introduce, or if you want to bring in the real-time VWAP calculation that you saw on the matrix and you saw in radar screen, you have to put it up here because it's a straight quote. It's not something that you can plot historically. If you want to see that real-time VWAP, I'm going to go into the status line. I'm going to go to settings, window, status line. And in the status line, right here in the available column, you have VWAP. I can add it. And let's move it down next to percent change. So now when I look up here on the status line, you can see the VWP volume weighted average price is 148.83, which should match the 148.83 for Apple right here in radar screen. And it should match the 148.83 right here in the VWAP for the matrix. All right, real-time calculations come straight from the server. Okay, now if you add, let's go here to studies and add studies. Yeah, the real-time VWAP, it's not going to be in the studies. Notice that I'm going here into a chart analysis and I'm going here to VWAP, and the one that stands VWAP alone is not part of the studies either. So it's part of the studies if you go into radar screen, but if you are in a chart and you go to the VWAPs you're only going to find the two. You're going to find the VWAP estimated, and you're going to find the VWAP bands. Does everybody have this one right here, the PVAR bands 4904? I think that's a built-in VWAP, or is this one that I brought in from somewhere else? Maybe it's a custom study that I put into my list, and I see it just me. Does everybody have this or not? Go into the list of studies in chart analysis and let me know right here in the chat how many VWAPs did you see? No bands? Okay, Prasad is telling me that he doesn't see the bands. So you only see the VWAP estimated. Let's go, because I think the VWAP estimated allows you to have bands on them again as well. Let me go here to VWAP estimated. Okay, so it automatically has the bands built in. So the VWAP is going to be the magenta line, and the blue and the yellow are standard deviations from that VWAP calculation. Take a look at the VWAP calculation starts at the very beginning of the day. And we already established that. We know that the VWAP resets at the beginning of the day. But take a look at the value here. It's 148.84, which doesn't match. In this case, it does match 148.84, even though this one over here on the chart is estimated. That's interesting. So for Apple, it did provide a very similar calculation. Let's change the symbol. Let's go here to AT&T. So for AT&T, we see a VWAP estimated of 20.75 right here in the magenta. And if we look at the VWAP that comes from the server in real time, is also $20.75. So you can see the proximity is usually very on point. Even though it's estimated, sometimes it's exactly the same. I guess as the market, trades more and you have a full day worth of activity, you may start seeing some deviation from one to the other. Real time is up here, Prasad. The estimated, let's get something clear here. The estimated, it's also being calculated in real time, but it is the historical values that affect the end result as well. And that's why it said estimated. But if you really want to know, the one that includes every single traded price against the volume, you have to look at it up here, right here, VWAP, VWP. I added it by going into settings and window. Right here under available, you should find what I just added, which is right here, VWAP. It's a 5-minute chart too. Let's go to a 1 minute. Thank you. That's a good point, Marcel. If I go to a 1 minute, well, the 1 minute shows me. So it should be the more detail you give the candlesticks, the closer the calculation is going to be. So let's because you're giving the chart more data points to calculate the VWAP on. So if you go to a 30-minute, for example, still, that's very, very on point, very on point. Let's go here to ESU 22. Okay, so we're probably going to see a difference here. You can see that on the S&P E-mini, on a 10-minute chart, we have a VWAP of 38.85. And you can see the real-time calculation, 38.85.46 for the real-time, 0.32 for the estimated. That's where we see the little discrepancy. But for the most part, it's going to be a very close calculation. Let's take a look at the easy language code of this for a moment. Let me right-click on one of its lines and click on Edit Easy Language for VWAP, because I want to show you guys something. So you can read all the green text here. It does an estimate of the volume weighted average price. It uses the average of the open, high, low, and closing prices of each bar. The true VWAP, which is calculated by the exchange and can be plotted in a radar screen using the built-in VWAP indicator, uses the price and volume of every trade to calculate the VWAP. So it just says what we said earlier, you know, the approximation used in the studies is very close to the true VWAP at short intervals, like 1 minute, 5 minutes, etc. As the bar interval increases, more variation is seen between the approximation. Okay, so enough, but when you get some time, you know, this green text at the top of any easy language document is just additional information on the code and how it's being calculated. But here the price that is being used is average price. If I open this function, you can see how the average price is the open plus the high plus the low plus the close times 0.25. Okay. So a quarter of that. Instead of dividing by 4, it just multiplies by 0.5, which gives you the same result. Let's go over here to the settings of this because I want to show you the price that is being used is the average price. You can change that. Length is 20. The length is 20 in order to provide you the average calculation. Number of standard deviations. Plot upper band and plot lower band. If you don't want to see the bands, if you just want to see the VWAP line, just set those two parameters to false, like the plot lower and plot upper, set them to false. And then you only see the VWAP line, but the bands are automatically turned on for it. The other study that I have in my list of studies, the VWAP bands, it's similar to this. So I'm not going to show it because it's not built into TradeStation. It's probably something that I found in the forums. Many years ago, TradeStation did not have an indicator that plotted an estimated VWAP. So there were a lot of contributors to the forum that created their own studies. And that's probably where I got mine. Let me turn these back to true. All right, and you do have these high alert and low alert values that you can set. So if you want to be alerted when the price drops to 3,900, you can say 3,900 right here. But if it goes up to 4,000, also alert me. And then you have to make sure that you go to the alerts and enable the alert, although otherwise you won't get that alert. Okay. So now I'm getting alerts here. And it's going crazy on the alerts because it's currently trading above the 3,900. Let me go ahead and set that alert one more time. So low alert, 3,900. So these are values on the VWAP, not the traded price itself. So if I look at the VWAP is at 38.85. So it is below my low alert of 3,900. And that's why I'm getting this alert continuously every single time. So if the VWAP drops below 38.80, let's drop this to 38.80. No, still. So what in the world does this mean? Let's take a look. Let me look at the code here for a moment. The alert criteria is down here. I just want to make sure that you guys have all the information. If alert enabled, then begin. If VWAP value is greater than or equal to high alert, then alert. And if the VWAP is below or equal to low alert, okay, so now my alerts have stopped. I thought the alerts were still going on, but they were queued from when they were on. There were still a lot of alerts that had to be triggered, and I think my computer just got a little bit caught up, you know, triggering those alerts, but now it's off. So you just have to make sure that when you set the high alert and the low alert, it's not in reference to the current trading price, is in reference to the value of that VWAP. If you have the VWAP to go higher or lower than a particular threshold, you can go into the inputs and set those as a high alert and low alert, and making sure that you enable that alert. Okay, are there any questions about this? Let's talk about some of the signals that may be generated when you're looking at VWAP. A bullish signal, the price crosses above the VWAP, buyers may be stepping in, signaling there may be upward momentum. A bearish signal, price crosses below the VWAP, buyers may be taking profits or sellers may be stepping in, causing potential downward momentum. We're talking again about these levels that are significant and are created by VWAP because of how it uses volume and how it uses the average prices. You can also use the standard deviations, the upper band and the lower band that we disabled and enabled back into the VWAP for the extremes. When the prices reach these extremes, it's likely for it to come back to where the normal prices are. So you can use those extremes as entry signals as well. So if it reaches an extreme to the top and it starts coming down again, that is a short signal. And if it does the opposite, if it goes to the extreme to the bottom and it starts coming up, that is a bullish signal. So approaching or breaking the standard deviation bands may be used to manage long and short trades, right? And that's about it, you know? Let's go ahead and pull up the disclosures here to make sure that we are aware of the risks. Let's see, I'm having a couple of questions. Can you adjust to cover multiple sessions, like 3 days? That's a good question, Marcel. Now, if you go over here to the code, there's going to be some code here that forces the VWAP to reset. The VWAP was designed to be a number that resets every single day, but I can see, you know, in some cases where you may want to test the VWAP, including multiple trading sessions. So here it is, current session. And here's where the reset happens. So if current session does not equal the current session 1 bar ago, so yes, we would have to modify this to make sure that the calculation continues on and doesn't reset. So that's something that we can probably work on. Would require a little bit more custom code but it seems like it's something we can do. So just remove any reference that resets the condition and just it's a continuation of prices. But then we have to think about, okay, so if we do that, how do we tell the indicator to calculate a particular amount of time? Is it bars back? Is it, you know, with a begin and an end? So there's different variables that arise when we think about, you know, removing the resetting. So some things to think about, Marcel. Thank you for your question. All right, guys, that's my class for today. Hopefully you guys walk away with something. We talked about the details about VWAP, how it's calculated, some of the signals that are generated when the current price crosses these VWAP levels. But if you have any questions, please join me on Friday at 11:30 for my Q&A. Remember, 2 guest speakers this week. On Thursday, we have John Brook, 11:30 in the morning, Eastern Time. And we have Frank Choi on Friday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Frank Choi is the Vice President of Product Management, and he's reserved some time to talk to us on Friday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Make sure you mark your calendars for that, okay? Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining me today. And let me share that PDF one more time with the class. And here you go. Have a wonderful afternoon, and I'll see everyone tomorrow for our strategy trading class. Goodbye, everyone. Great having you.